Are you thinking about owning your own business and have come to the conclusion that you should at least consider acquiring an existing business because you get to keep the lights on at home and in the business to start and can pour all that extra energy into turning your business into the dream that you always wanted? This is Brian Stevens with Thinking Outside the Box, tips and ideas for business acquirers, and this is the 11 essential points. The tips and ideas for helping people when they first start looking at all those businesses that are online promising all this great glory, etc. And it's here to help you save more time by analyzing the different ads that you see on the internet so you can decide whether you should invest more time or not. This is Brian Stevens with BuyBizUSA, so you can reach out to us at BuyBizUSA, and this is the Thinking Outside the Box series. Okay, we're going to talk about the 11 essential points, and this is actually a screenshot from an ad, and I've added some little red notes on there from one of the ads from the Business Brokers of Florida. They do a really great job, unlike some of the websites that you see, businessbroker.net and Business for Sale and BizQuest and all those guys, put some basic information on there, but their website really gives you a lot of details. Now, I know this is probably really hard to read, but I'm going to go through the 11 points really quickly. I want to start off by saying, hey, there's two different factors that we talk about a lot of times when we talk about earnings. One of them is that seller's discretionary earnings, which is you, if you're taking over the business and you're going to work in it full time, not the family, not replacing or bringing in your family members, which you may do, but you as a working owner. And the other factor is called EBITDA, which is very much like that, except for it counts for paying basically for a manager, as if you were going to buy 12 of some sort of business and have a manager in place in each of those. It would be what would be left over after you paid that manager in there. But for the most part, we're going to refer to seller's discretionary earnings, you working in the business as a lifestyle. Okay, now that screen that I showed you with this shot out here, I'm going to go through page by page and pull out number one, number two. We're going to talk, first of all, do the earnings justify the price? Well, every business owner would love to get a lot of money for their business. I mean, who wouldn't? And you just got to make sure that it seems reasonable. Now, there's no single rule that can say that every business, if it's making $100,000, should be priced at X. You get to know the industry guidelines, know the details, the nuances of that specific business, and I recommend that you always go get some professional help to get some ideas. But one other factor I consider, people often price their businesses on the high side instead of the low side, so if you really like a business, you feel free to make a reasonable offer, but make sure that it makes sense so that you can afford the business. Number two, do the earnings to gross sales make sense? So I see a lot of people make these inflated reporting like, my business is grossing $1 million and it's netting $500,000. Well, in most all cases, that just isn't the case. So anyway, just because the ad says so doesn't make it true. Things like big rent can kill a business out there. Many businesses net under 20% of gross sales, sometimes far less than that, 10, 12, 14%. It really depends on the business. Some are losing money, of course, and you probably don't want to buy those, at least not any particular time soon. And then get to know the industry standards because every industry is a little bit different from each other. Okay, number three, does the reason for selling make sense? Get to know the rest of the story. So a lot of times people say, I'm going to retire. Well, the person is 31 years old, or even 13, that would be crazy, but 31 years old, you got to say, well, why are you going to retire? And how can you afford to retire on this money? There might be real reasons for things going on. Get to know the details. Do your research, find out what's going on, maybe even have them sign a seller's disclosure document and have them review all the things they might know about the market, the economy, things going on, etc. Okay, number four, the hours of the working owner. And this is remembering one working family member. Does the owner work reasonable hours? Can you basically do the same sort of thing? And realize that when you take over, probably for a period of time, you're probably going to spend even more time because you're going to be on a learning curve to learn the nuances of the business. Just find out, make sure it's something that's reasonable, something you can live with. And again, I'm going to remind everybody, seller's discretionary earnings is just one working owner. So I've seen businesses where they're claiming, here's how much we bring in as a family, and we've got the kids and the spouse, etc. You need to pay market value to take away from that household earnings of the business owner so that you're paying all those people market value and determining just what one working owner, because you may or may not have your family members all working and they may or may not want to put all the money into the household. Okay, let's go to the number five. This is it's not how long the business has been around that's really interesting, but how long the business owner has been around. So you might find out the business has been established for 25 years. That's a good sign. Owned it for 25 years, that's a really good sign. realize that there's sometimes you'll see people that's selling a business, been around for 40 years, and then you find out they've been around for 14 months, and you need to find out what's going on, what's happening, why are they selling it after so quickly if it's such an incredible business. Okay, another factor is the non-compete. This is very, very important. Okay, non-compete, people will generally say, yeah, I'll get out of the business and I won't compete against you. Miles, 100 miles for 10 years. Realize that in every state there's some reasonableness in terms of what can be supported. And if you ask for too much, sometimes that becomes a problem, just like asking for too much distance and that sort of thing. But think about what's reasonable. As an example for the distance, the comparison of a hair salon, maybe 5 or 7 miles or something like that is sufficient. Look at each market and determine what's right. But if you were selling an e-commerce business or buying an e-commerce business, the distance might be worldwide, etc. Okay? Skills and licenses. Some businesses just require a business license. Other ones, have a requirement for people being in business for a long period of time. Sometimes, like for a lot of commercial businesses, commercial or contracting rather, you need to have 4 years of experience, etc. So don't just rely on what the seller is telling you. The rules have changed for some of these things since they've been in business. So do your own research and make sure you're not acquiring it. Sometimes you can get somebody to hold the license for you. If you're dealing with some of the banks, though, you need to make sure that the banks are on board with that and going to tolerate it. So, make sure that you put as a contingency that you can work out the details of understanding the license. Sometimes the seller will be kind enough to hold the license for a while. Many times they say, if you buy the business, I don't want anything to do with it. It isn't very helpful, but that's just the way it is, and they just don't want to have the liability beyond selling the business, and we get that. Okay, data source. Okay, where are people getting the numbers that they're claiming for the business? So sometimes they have owner estimate, owner approved, projections. I like it when they say profit loss statements and or tax returns, and then they do these adjustments. So having a good source of financial records is important. But realize that even taxes can be, I have in here faked. That's kind of not a nice term, but I've had people that have given tax returns and we said, well, good, we just want to compare now what you've sent to the IRS because we need it for the SBA loan. And suddenly they're like, well, I think that might have been one of the drafts I had. And it turns out the numbers that they're earning were very, very different. Sometimes they forget or make a mistake or what have you. You just need to trust but verify. Keep that policy and rule, but realize that tax returns are far better than stuff in a little black book or on a notebook or something like that. Okay, number 9, are the expenses reasonable and the adjustments reasonable? So here's what I'm talking about in a nutshell, and we'll go through a whole series on adjusting financials to get things. But people might say, made $1 million in gross sales and took home $150,000. You look at the bottom of their tax returns and show they made $30,000, but then you find out, well, they paid themselves a salary, they paid their spouse a salary, and the spouse hasn't worked in the business for years. They wrote off a really nice car to get to work, which was not essential because they don't even need transportation, and they've taken off vacations and all those things. So sometimes if you're going to go for a bank loan, the banks are going to like some of these things and some they won't. You might roll your eyes thinking, well, how do I track this down and believe in it? Nonetheless, look through that in detail. And again, go get professional help to help you understand if the expenses are reasonable and that sort of thing. Okay, number 10, rent is a tough one. Quite often you can negotiate terms like, hey, can I get another 5 years or 10 years or what have you? In fact, for getting an SBA loan, the SBA likes to have a linked up amount of years that you've got, at least for options for being in the property, along with the length of the loan, which is typically for 7A loans, 10 years. It could be 7 to 10 years, etc. But realize that it's very unlikely they're going to go to the landlord and say, hey, I'm this bright, shining new person, and I'd like you to take your rent down from $6,000 a month to $3,000 a month so I can afford to pay this guy a lot of money for the business. It just doesn't happen like that. So it has to be reasonable. On the other hand, if a person's selling a business and their gross revenues are now so low that the rent is 20%, 30%, or a big chunk of it, and that's out of line with the industry standards, it can be damaging and it's hard to overcome. You can improve labor, you can manage your cost of goods and that sort of thing, but if you can't change the rent because the landlord's going to charge what the landlord's going to charge, just be cognizant that that's a real big challenge that you need to overcome. So make sure is the rent reasonable compared to the revenues. Okay, we're almost at the very end. What I like are businesses that have SBA financing. It isn't the only way to go. And by the way, you can get loans from banks that don't have to be tied to SBA. And there's a lot of ways you can come up with money if you have 401ks or IRAs to get down payments, etc. I'm just a big believer. One more thing that makes businesses really, really cool and sexy is that if they are SBA pre-qualified. So that's usually a good sign, but usually only a small percentage of, or if you go to the internet and you look at businesses, you're going to find that only a small percentage are SBA pre-qualified, making six figures, and can prove everything with their tax returns and their financial statements, etc., which is a requirement for getting the SBA loan pre-qualified also. By the way, it's not pre-approved, so if somebody's telling you pre-approved, they're probably just don't understand the nomenclature or too new in the industry to understand the difference, and so that's an important element. But look for pre-qualified. By the way, you can go get yourself pre-qualified. Go have an initial conversation. If you'd like a great list of banks, by the way, that can help you, determine how much you can afford for the business and where you stand on loans, etc., and get an idea of what's going to be required for you to get a loan. I highly recommend you go talk to a couple of different banks, and I recommend you talk to more than one bank. Seriously, some banks like one industry versus another. Sometimes it changes midstream when they've met a quota. Sometimes they like some people more than others. Some are more lenient in terms of credit scores, etc. Anyway, talk to a few different banks till you find a really strong comfort level. Okay, I'm almost done here. I would say instead of starting up, start up. That means acquiring an existing business is a great way to go, compared to just starting something from scratch or buying a franchise and starting that from scratch. Okay, that's all I got for you. This is Brian Stevens with BuyBizUSA. A lot of ways you can get a hold of us if you have some questions, you want to know more about it, you want to get a summary of this report that I just shared with you. Go to our website at BuyBizUSA.com. You find our contact information. You can even text BuyBizUSA to the number 22828. You get a free book report on mostly how to sell a business, but that might be useful to you as well. You can check us out at LinkedIn, Facebook, and a lot of different places. Anyway, make great things happen. Don't let things stand in your way that keep you from your dreams. Acquiring an existing business is an absolutely wonderful way to go. I appreciate you. Take care. Good luck, and start by thinking outside the box. This is Brian Stevens with the 11 essential points. Bye-bye.